Chapter 1. A descent begins. You are floating at the edge of a vast ocean, your body held by the rhythm of the waves. The air is soft with salt, the horizon endless, and above you, the sun spreads a warm light across the rippling surface. For a moment, you simply breathe, feeling the gentle roll of the water against your chest, your legs drifting weightless below. Then, as if invited by the sea itself, you allow yourself to sink. Slowly, effortlessly, you let go of the surface. The light above softens, bending into shimmering patterns that flicker across your skin. It begins as a slow descent, like lying back into sleep. The surface world still lingers close, the air and sky only a glance away, but already the blue around you grows deeper, richer. The sun feels distant, its warmth muted by layers of water. The sounds shift too. What was once the hush of waves becomes muffled silence. You are crossing the threshold between worlds, the one of air and light above, and the one of shadow and stillness below. With each meter you drift downward, you sense a gradual change in the color of your surroundings. The water darkens, first to a deep turquoise, then to a dusky blue. Shafts of sunlight follow you, their beams like golden spears cutting into the deep. They seem endless at first, but already you notice how quickly their strength fades. The ocean takes light and scatters it until brightness dissolves into a soft haze. Your eyes adjust, learning to read subtler contrasts, the shift of currents, the flicker of silver scales, the movement of shadows. Time stretches in this place. A minute feels like many. Your body grows quiet, guided by the rhythm of your breath. You inhale slowly, you exhale slowly, and the water around you seems to answer in kind, pressing gently inward and then easing. The ocean becomes a cradle, rocking you deeper with its patience. You pass through layers of life. Near the surface, fish glide in small schools, their bodies like fragments of mirrors catching the last of the sunlight. They move together, turning as one, flashing in unison before vanishing into darker water. Below them, larger creatures roam, slower and more deliberate. A drifting jellyfish with its long, transparent veil, a turtle that paddles silently with steady grace. They are not startled by your presence. They have seen descent before, the movement of things slipping quietly into the depths. The deeper you sink, the cooler the water feels. Each degree a reminder of distance from the sun. The surface world becomes memory. Light is weaker now, a fading glow above your head, a halo slipping further and further away. You are surrounded instead by gradients of blue, so deep they feel endless, a color beyond ordinary names. It is not sky blue, not midnight blue, but something ancient, the color of Earth's oldest places, where sunlight has never lived. As you drift, you recall that this is how the ocean has always been. For billions of years, long before, your ancestors walked on land. The seas stretched wide and deep, sheltering life in their shifting layers. The trench you are descending toward was shaped by the slow dance of Earth's plates, movements so gradual they escape human time. You are entering not only a different environment, but a different scale of existence, where patience is measured in centuries and silence has its own gravity. Your body feels the shift too. The further down you go, the more the water presses. Not sharply, not painfully, but steadily, as if invisible hands are wrapping you closer. It is a gentle foreshadowing of what waits below, where pressure becomes immense. For now, though, it feels like an embrace, a reminder that this world belongs to forces larger than yourself. You relax into it, letting the water support your weight. There is a calmness in surrendering to the descent. Above, the surface life is full of hurry and noise. But here, time loses its edge. Your heartbeat slows, your thoughts soften, unraveling like ribbons into the quiet. The deeper you go, the more the world outside fades, until you are left only with breath, body, and water. This is not falling. This is not drowning. It is being carried, like a leaf drifting down through still air. Soon, the last of the sunlight thins to a fragile glow. Around you stretches the twilight zone. Scientists call it the mesopelagic, the layer where light cannot sustain life, but where faint glimmers still filter through. You imagine it as the ocean's dusk, a permanent evening where creatures rise at night to feed and retreat again when day returns. Lanternfish stir here, their bodies glittering with tiny dots of light. Squid pulse their way upward, ribbons trailing behind. Everything seems to float in slow motion, as though the water thickens time itself. Your imagination turns to scale. You know that if Mount Everest, the tallest mountain, were placed into the ocean here, its peak would still be thousands of meters beneath the waves. The Mariana Trench, toward which you drift, is deeper than the tallest mountain is high. It is a reversal of perspective. Instead of rising toward the sky, you are moving into a hollow carved beneath the world. It is as if the earth holds not only mountains and valleys above ground, but mirrored landscapes below, hidden in water. As you think this, the hush around you grows thicker, the silence more profound. The sea is vast beyond comprehension, yet it feels intimate, drawing you into its rhythm. You are reminded that every breath you take, even on land, is tied to this realm. Much of the oxygen you inhale is created by tiny organisms drifting in sunlit layers above, phytoplankton that bloom and vanish with the seasons. Even here, descending toward darkness, you are bound to the sea's generosity. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine that your body is dissolving into the water. Skin becomes fluid, bones become currents, breath becomes bubbles rising. You are no longer separate. You are part of the descent itself, a thread woven into the ocean's tapestry. When you open your eyes again, the darkness seems less intimidating, more familiar. You feel welcomed. Still, questions stir within you. How deep does this place go? How vast is the trench? And how did it come to be? You know the ocean floor is not uniform, not a flat plane, but carved and folded by the restless shifting of Earth's crust. Somewhere below lies a chasm deeper than imagination, a hidden scar of planetary movement. You are not there yet, but the thought lingers, pulling you further. You sense that this descent is not only downward, but inward. Just as you sink into the trench, you are sinking into yourself, into patience, into quiet, into wonder. The ocean becomes a mirror, showing you the depth of your own thoughts, the pressure of your own silence, the strange comfort of letting go. The last traces of light above dim into memory. Around you spreads the vastness of twilight and endless dusk. The sea has no hurry. It asks only that you drift, that you listen, that you wait. And so you do. You float in stillness, carried down by water, guided by silence, drawn by unseen depths. The trench waits below, its shape hidden in shadows, its story carved in folds of rock. You are not rushing. You are only drifting closer, tracing the first lines of the abyss, sensing that beneath you lies a world sculpted not by chance, but by the slow breath of the earth itself. Chapter 2. The Shape of the Abyss. You drift deeper now, carried by silence, and the thought takes hold. The ocean floor is not smooth. It is not the flat plane many imagine when they picture what lies beneath the waves. Instead, it is shaped and reshaped, a restless canvas of valleys, ridges, mountains, and scars. To imagine the trench, you must first release the idea of calm flatness. You must see the ocean floor as a body in motion, one that stretches, folds, and breathes. As your descent continues, the faint glow from above has nearly vanished, but in your mind, you draw the map of what lies below. The Western Pacific holds one of the most dramatic features on Earth, the Mariana Trench. Nearly 11 kilometers deep at its lowest point, it is the deepest known part of the ocean. To grasp that scale, you imagine Mount Everest turned upside down and set into the sea. Its peak, the highest point on land, would still be swallowed completely by water, lost in the dark layers above the trench's floor. How does such a place form? The answer begins not with the ocean, but with the Earth's crust itself. You picture the planet's outer shell, broken into giant plates of rock that drift slowly across the mantle. They move at a pace so small you could not see it in a lifetime, yet across millions of years, these movements rearrange continents and sculpt oceans. Where plates meet, the Earth writes its most dramatic lines. Some places rise, building mountains. Others fold downward, pulling the seafloor into trenches. The Mariana Trench is one such crease. Here, the Pacific Plate pushes beneath the smaller Mariana Plate. This slow subduction carves the abyss, forcing the crust down into the mantle. It is not a violent tearing, but a steady bowing, like paper pressed under weight. The trench is the mark of this bow, a furrow in the seafloor, a curve drawn by geological patience. You imagine the earth exhaling here, letting out tension in a sigh that spans millennia. Around you, in this imagined descent, the shape of the trench begins to take form. The sides slope steep and jagged, cliffs plunging into shadow. At times, the walls look almost vertical, like underwater mountains flipped on their heads. Crevices branch from the main channel, narrow gullies where sediments drift and settle. Each ridge and slope has been molded by landslides, earthquakes, and the endless gravity of water pressing down. It is not a single hollow, but a landscape within a landscape. An entire hidden geography stretching hundreds of kilometers long. The thought humbles you. Above the ocean, humans build mountains of steel and glass, cities that rise toward the sky. But here, below, nature builds inversions of those cities, valleys, and walls carved without witness, deeper than imagination. Few eyes have seen them, yet they exist with or without your noticing. The trench is a cathedral no architect designed, yet it has stood far longer than any human monument. As you picture its scale, you realize that depth is not the only measure of the trench's size. Its length stretches nearly 2,500 kilometers across the seabed, like a scar running along the Pacific. This is no narrow fissure. It is a system, a boundary between plates, a reminder that the planet is alive with movement. You sense the earth shifting beneath you even now, plates grinding slowly, the trench deepening, reshaping itself over ages beyond your lifetime. The pressure of water around you increases, reminding you of the trench's enormity. Each 100 meters adds weight, pressing like invisible hands. And yet, the Earth's crust here does more than endure. It folds, creaks, and gives way, shaping a hollow that welcomes both water and life. You imagine this folding as a kind of breathing, In one place, the crust rises to form mountains. In another, it exhales, bowing downward into trenches. Both are expressions of the same restless planet. Sediments rain down through the water, settling on the trench's slopes. Over time, they fill gullies and build layers, burying fragments of shells, skeletons, and volcanic ash. The trench becomes not only a shape of stone, but also an archive, holding within its walls the story of life and death across millions of years. Each grain that drifts down is a page, settling slowly into a record of Earth's memory. You float along the imagined edge of the trench and sense how alien it feels. The slopes are not smooth beaches, but sharp ridges, covered in loose rock and clay. In places, earthquakes have shaken entire sections, sending avalanches of sediment crashing downward into the abyss. The result is a landscape of chaos and beauty. Cliffs fractured, valleys deepened, ledges built where strange creatures cling. To stand here, if it were possible, would be like standing at the rim of a canyon so vast the horizon itself disappears. And yet, within this abyss, life exists. At first, the trench feels like an absence, a hollow of silence. But its shape, its folds, its slopes, all create niches where life finds a way. Microbes cling to the walls, feeding on minerals. Larger animals, rare and adapted, drift through its channels. The trench is not barren. Its shape is the foundation upon which entire ecosystems rest, invisible yet essential. The thought calms you. Even in the deepest, darkest crease of the earth, form creates possibility. Structure gives way to life. The trench is not simply emptiness. It is a vessel, a cradle, a stage on which the drama of survival unfolds. You feel its geometry, not as emptiness, but as potential. As your descent continues in imagination, you see that the trench is not a scar, but a secret. It is easy to think of scars as reminders of wounds, but here the mark of subduction is also a reminder of connection. Two plates meet. One slides beneath the other, and the trench is the line of their embrace. In this embrace, the earth reveals both its fragility and its strength. It is a crease where tension is released, where the planet quietly rearranges itself to remain whole. Your body drifts weightless, and you sense how small you are within this architecture. The trench stretches beyond your sight, its walls vanishing into shadow, its floor still far below. Yet within that enormity, you also feel belonging. You are part of the same planet that folds and exhales. Your bones carry minerals born of ancient seas. Your blood carries salts from vanished oceans. The trench is not separate. It is part of the same earth that shaped you. Still, questions linger. If the shape of the trench is carved by subduction, what does that mean for you, drifting here? What does it feel like to live beneath such weight? To exist where pressure becomes unimaginable? The trench is not only a shape, it is also an experience, one that bends every living thing that dares to enter. As you trace the silent geography, your mind prepares for the next step. The abyss has shown you its shape. Now it will show you its strength. The water presses harder. The invisible hands grow firmer. Ahead lies the lesson of pressure, of endurance, of how life bends but does not break beneath the mountains of water above. Chapter 3. Pressure like invisible hands. The water is no longer just surrounding you. It is pressing, folding inward, leaning close with steady persistence. At the surface, you might never notice it, but as you drift deeper, you feel it growing. It is not sharp or sudden. It is gradual, like an invisible hand resting against your chest, heavier with each passing meter. The deeper you go, the more hands join, layer upon layer, until the weight feels endless. Pressure is everywhere here. At 10 meters beneath the surface, the weight of the water is already 1 atmosphere more than what your body feels on land. At 100 meters, it is 10 times greater. At 1,000, it is nearly 100 times. By the time you reach the trench, 11 kilometers down, the pressure is more than 1,000 times the weight you carry at the surface. Imagine every fingertip, every inch of your skin pressed upon by a mountain of water. Imagine that mountain extending across your whole body, unrelenting, unbroken. And yet, strangely, you are calm. You imagine yourself not crushed, but carried. The pressure does not feel like violence. It feels like presence. It is as if the ocean is reminding you of its enormity, its patience. You cannot resist it. You cannot push back. You can only yield. And in yielding, you survive. This is the same lesson life has learned in these depths. Creatures that live here are not built to fight pressure. They are built to soften into it. Their bodies carry little air, no hard shells that would collapse under the weight. Instead, they are fluid, flexible, pliant. A snailfish in the trench looks delicate, almost fragile, with a body so thin and gelatinous you could mistake it for something that should not survive. Yet it thrives, precisely because it bends. Its softness is its strength. You let this thought sink into you. On land, strength is often imagined as hardness, muscles, stone, steel. But here, beneath thousands of meters of water, strength is surrender. To resist pressure would be to break. To soften into it is to endure. It is a paradox that feels like wisdom whispered by the trench itself. The more you yield, the stronger you become. Your body drifts further. You imagine the air in your lungs shrinking with each meter, compressed by the weight. In truth, divers cannot descend so deep because the human body carries too much air. In lungs, in blood, even in the smallest spaces between tissues. But in this dreamlike descent, you feel your breath fold inward without pain. You imagine yourself reshaped, more fluid, more like the creatures that dwell here. You are no longer resisting. You are becoming part of the deep. The ocean reminds you that pressure is not only downward, it is around you in every direction. Above, below, to your left, to your right. The water presses equally. That balance keeps you whole. If the force came only from one side, you would be crushed. But here, the pressure is fair, distributed across your body like a blanket that weighs 1,000 times more than air, but wraps you evenly, without break. You think of Earth itself, how pressure is woven into every part of its being. At the core of the planet, pressures rise far beyond those of the trench, holding metals in solid form despite searing heat. At the surface, air presses invisibly upon your skin every moment of your life, a sea of atmosphere you barely notice. Pressure is not unusual. It is always here. What changes in the trench is only scale. The invisible hands grow stronger, heavier, more insistent. The silence here deepens, and you imagine the voices of life shaped by this burden. At such pressure, sound carries differently. Some whales dive thousands of meters, sending low calls that travel through water like trembling bells. You wonder if, even now, a faint call vibrates through the abyss, reaching you not through ears, but through bones. It feels like a reminder that even under immense weight, voices find a way to carry. As you drift downward, you think about how humans have learned to touch this world. Submersibles, metal spheres reinforced with steel and titanium, are among the only vessels able to descend here. Even they creak, even they strain under the burden. The walls of these vessels must be so thick that only a small chamber remains for people inside. In 1960, when Jacques Picard and Don Walsh reached the bottom of the trench in the Trieste, they described the sound of the hull groaning, like wood under winter ice. And yet, the vessel endured, softened not in body but in design, curved to distribute the pressure evenly. Even human invention must learn the lesson of the deep: yield, balance, adapt. The pressure becomes not only physical, but emotional. You feel the weight of time, of silence, of depth itself. The further you drift, the more the surface world seems fragile, light, distant. Here, the deep teaches patience. It tells you that you cannot hurry in such places. Every movement must be deliberate, every breath slow. To exist here is to accept slowness, to stretch time into something vast and unhurried. You imagine how a creature lives in this world. A snailfish glides gently, conserving energy because sudden movement would cost too much in such heavy water. A shrimp drifts with currents, using the ocean's weight as an ally, not an enemy. Even microbes, unseen to your eye, cling to rocks and sediments, their cells tuned to pressures that would tear apart others. They live not despite the weight, but because of it. Their very structure is designed to thrive where others cannot. The thought returns to you again. Strength in softness. You feel your body as water, your thoughts as flowing currents. You do not resist the pressure around you. You let it fold you into stillness. The invisible hands press harder, but instead of fear, you feel release. The trench is not crushing you. It is holding you. Your mind stretches outward, reflecting on how pressure is mirrored in your own life above. There, you feel the weight of expectations, the press of time, the burden of decisions. But here, in the metaphor of the ocean, you see a gentler way. The creatures of the deep do not harden themselves against weight. They open, they soften, they yield. Could you not do the same? Could you not allow the burdens you carry to flow around you, pressing equally on every side, instead of breaking you from one direction alone? The pressure increases still, but you remain calm. You are learning to see it not as threat, but as teacher. The deep has no room for resistance, only adaptation. You imagine that each invisible hand pressing upon you is also guiding you deeper, further into quiet, further into patience. Still, questions whisper. If life can yield to pressure, what happens when the darkness becomes complete? What happens when no light remains to soften the weight? Already, the beams of sun have vanished. Already, the trench is growing darker. Ahead lies not only pressure, but a silence so complete it becomes its own presence, and a darkness that carries its own kind of light. The ocean presses harder, but you do not resist. You exhale slowly, sinking deeper. The invisible hands grow firmer, and in their embrace you feel a quiet truth. The abyss does not destroy. It transforms. Chapter 4. Darkness becomes its own light. The last traces of sunlight are gone now. Above you, the world of waves and clouds has faded into memory. Around you, the water is darker than midnight, darker than any night sky you have ever seen. The ocean has drawn you into its silent chambers, where no ray of the sun can enter. And yet, The abyss is not empty. Slowly, delicately, the darkness blooms with its own light. At first, it is a faint shimmer, so soft you wonder if your eyes have imagined it. A speck of blue hovers, then another, then a scattering of pale green. They flicker and drift, appearing and vanishing in slow rhythm. The creatures here do not borrow light from the sun. They create it within themselves. This is bioluminescence, living light, a chemistry of survival. You imagine the process gently. Within tiny bodies, molecules meet, oxygen flows, and a spark is released. It is not fire. It carries no heat. It is closer to a whisper, a glow produced in silence. For some creatures, this light draws mates. For others, it lures prey. Some release glowing clouds to distract predators, like lantern smoke dissolving in water. The abyss, though dark, is full of these conversations in light, sentences written in glows and flashes, punctuation in sparks. A jelly drifts near, its body as clear as glass. Along its rim, tiny points of blue-green light pulse in a spiral, like a galaxy turning in miniature. You watch it spin slowly, carrying its own constellation through the void. Nearby, a lanternfish glimmers with dots running the length of its body, as though it wears a string of stars. It dives upward for food at night, then drifts back down by day, its body carrying the memory of distant light. As your eyes adjust, you see more of them. A shrimp flickers with sudden sparks, as if striking invisible matches. A squid flares with bright blue for a moment, then folds back into shadow. Even the smallest plankton glitter with faint halos, drifting like dust motes in a shaft of invisible moonlight. The darkness is not absence. It is a canvas, and life here paints upon it with fire made of water. You let the sight calm you. On land, darkness often feels final, like a closing. But here it is an opening. The absence of sunlight makes room for other lights to appear, fragile and beautiful. You think of the night sky above earth, how stars shine only when the day withdraws. The trench is like that sky inverted, a galaxy not above your head, but around your body, shimmering in the deep. The rhythm of these lights is unhurried. Some creatures pulse steadily, like a heartbeat. Others flash in bursts, as though speaking in Morse code. Some glow constantly, a patient lantern carried through the dark. The longer you watch, the more you feel you are drifting through a language you cannot fully understand, but can deeply feel. You imagine what it means to live this way, carrying your own light, building brightness from within. These creatures do not wait for the sun. They do not depend on something beyond their reach. They find radiance inside themselves. You let that thought rest in your mind, gentle and steady. There is a light you carry, even in your own darkest waters. The trench grows colder as you drift deeper, but the glow of life surrounds you. You see how the patterns of light shape behavior. A fish flashes bright to lure smaller prey into its mouth. Another glows faintly along its belly, camouflaging itself against the dim light above so predators below cannot see its shadow. Each pulse, each glimmer is survival disguised as beauty. And yet, it feels like wonder too. Imagine a world where every step, every movement left behind a trail of stars. Imagine conversations not spoken in sound but in beams of color. Here, light is language, and language is survival. You feel you are drifting through a quiet library of glowing texts, pages turned in slow spirals by the current. A thought lingers. These creatures are fragile. Their bodies are soft, their lights easily quenched. And yet, In this harshest of environments, where pressure is immense, where sunlight never enters, they endure. Not through force, but through adaptation. They do not fight the darkness. They use it. They turn absence into stage, silence into music, emptiness into canvas. The more you drift, the more the lights surround you. Some are close, sharp enough to reveal outlines of drifting fins or translucent wings. Others are distant, flickering like stars too far to name. Together, they form a moving constellation, a universe folded into the sea. You are no longer certain whether you are sinking into the ocean or floating among galaxies. The resemblance is uncanny. Stars above, sparks below, endless in both directions. Your thoughts soften with the rhythm. Darkness here is not frightening. It is tender, patient, infinite. The glow of creatures does not banish it, but dances within it, reminding you that light and dark are not enemies. They are companions. Each gives meaning to the other. Your body feels weightless, as if the glow itself is carrying you downward. Each pulse of blue and green is a step in your descent. Each flicker a soft guide. The creatures do not notice you, and you do not disturb them. You are simply part of the drift, a silent witness to their luminous dance. You close your eyes for a moment and still see the afterimage of sparks. It lingers on your vision, like fireflies on summer nights, like stars on a clear winter sky. When you open them again, the trench is alive with more than you remembered, as if the act of seeing deepened the glow. You realize that this is the heart of the abyss's lesson. Darkness does not mean emptiness. It means possibility. It means that within silence, voices can emerge. Within stillness, movements can appear. Within shadow, light can be born. And yet, as wondrous as it is, you sense that this is only one layer of the abyss's story. For beyond the scattered sparks and glowing galaxies lies something stranger still, the shapes of beings themselves. Not just their lights, but their bodies, ghostly, transparent, twisted into forms unlike anything you have known. You are drifting toward them, guided by the last flickers of bioluminescence. The light fades behind you, and the silhouettes of strange creatures begin to rise. Chapter 5. The Dance of Strange Creatures. The darkness grows thicker around you, a velvet cloak without end. The last sparks of bioluminescence flicker behind, fading into memory. Ahead, the abyss opens into something stranger. Shapes begin to appear, faint silhouettes moving in the dim water. At first, they are only shadows, drifting and vanishing before you can be certain they were there. But slowly, your eyes adjust, and the trench reveals its hidden citizens. The first to emerge is delicate, a snailfish. Its body is pale, nearly translucent, shaped like a ribbon folded into the water. You expect something armored to survive in this place, but the snailfish is soft, fragile looking. Its skin is thin, its bones light. And yet, this fragile body is exactly what allows it to endure. With no heavy structure to crush under pressure, it bends and yields, floating like a ghost. You watch it drift, lips grazing the sediment in search of food, fins fanning gently as if stroking the abyss itself. Nearby, a shrimp drifts into view. Its body is see-through, a clear vessel lit only by faint flickers of internal glow. You can see its beating heart, its moving stomach, its delicate legs stroking the water. In any other place, it might seem vulnerable, exposed. But here, transparency is survival. Predators cannot chase what they cannot see. Invisibility is its armor. The shrimp pulses onward, vanishing into the dark as quickly as it arrived, a moving secret disguised as nothing at all. Then, without warning, a jellyfish floats upward, its bell glowing faintly with ribbons of blue fire. Its tentacles trail behind like silken threads, swaying with every current. Each movement is slow, unhurried, a dance performed not for an audience but for endurance. You imagine it pulsing for hours, days, perhaps weeks, drifting with no destination, existing simply as part of the ocean's rhythm. Its beauty is fragile, but in this darkness, beauty and survival are the same thing. The trench is full of such apparitions. Creatures rise and fade, never gathering in crowds, never filling the space. Each appears like a thought in your mind, brief, strange, unforgettable. One moment, you glimpse a fish with a mouth far too large for its body, designed to snap up anything that drifts near. Another moment, you see a squid no bigger than a hand, its body flashing a sudden alarm of red before vanishing again. In this deep, survival favors the unusual. To live here is to invent new shapes, new strategies, new ways of being. You begin to sense that the trench is not empty, but crowded with ghosts. Many of these creatures are unseen by human eyes, their bodies so fragile they collapse when brought to the surface. They exist only here, adapted to pressure, darkness, silence. To see them is to glimpse another kind of world, one that does not mirror the life you know above. Here, bodies are less solid, less certain. They are experiments, answers to questions only the deep could ask. Some creatures seem like riddles. The amphipod, a tiny crustacean, lives even in the deepest points of the trench. It feeds on scraps that drift down from above. The slow rain of dead plankton, fish, and organic matter that scientists call marine snow. To live on snow, to live on falling dust of life, it feels like poetry, a reminder that survival can be made from the smallest of gifts. Others are stranger still. Imagine a fish with transparent skin, its skull clear enough to reveal its eyes, round and green, glowing faintly as they roll upward to peer through the dark. This is the barrel-eye fish, a being so unlike anything on land, it feels more like dream than reality. Its head is a dome, its gaze fixed not on what is ahead, but on what is above, waiting for silhouettes of prey to drift across faint light. You float in awe, realizing that the deep does not shape creatures into likenesses of the surface. It invents entirely new blueprints. And then, as if to remind you of the abyss's power, an anglerfish appears. Its body is small, but its mouth stretches wide, armed with sharp teeth. Above its head, a glowing lure dangles, a beacon in the darkness. Prey, drawn toward the glow, wanders close, and the trap closes in silence. You feel a shiver, not fear, but recognition of cunning. Even here, where energy is scarce, life has learned to trick, to deceive, to survive through illusion. Each creature is part of a silent choreography. None move quickly. None waste energy. Their dance is slow, deliberate, graceful in its patience. To live in the trench is to move as if the water is thick as honey, to conserve every spark of energy, to let the currents carry you more than your muscles. You watch their rhythm and begin to feel it in yourself, your body floating slower, your breath becoming smaller, your thoughts dissolving into the water's stillness. The trench is teaching you. Life does not thrive here by resisting darkness or pressure. It thrives by weaving into them, becoming part of their rhythm. Softness becomes armor. Transparency becomes shield. Glow becomes language. Each creature is a poem written by necessity, a design carved by survival but expressed as beauty. As you drift, you notice how quiet your mind has become. The creatures are strange, but not frightening. They are simply different, reminders that life can take any form, anywhere. Their presence calms you because it proves that even in the harshest corners of Earth, existence finds a way to continue. You imagine yourself among them, a drifting shape, soft and translucent, glowing faintly with light of your own. You move with the current, feeding on what the ocean gives, bending into pressure, vanishing into shadow. It feels like freedom, to live without hurry, without edges, without resistance. The trench becomes not a prison, but a sanctuary. Still, you sense that the creatures are only part of the story. They are dancers, but what stage do they move upon? What sound accompanies their silent motions? Around you, the trench itself grows quieter still, the weight of water thickening silence into something you can almost touch. The dance of creatures continues, but it is set against a background of stillness so vast it feels alive in its own way. You wonder what silence means here. Above, silence is absence, of voices, of traffic, of sound. But here, silence is presence. It is a thing that holds, that surrounds, that speaks without speaking. The dance of creatures glows within it, like stars against a night sky. Without silence, their beauty would not shine. Without stillness, their movements would be lost. You drift a little further, and the trench deepens its lesson. Life is fragile here, yes, but fragility is not weakness. The snailfish, the shrimp, the jellyfish, each survives not by being stronger than the deep, but by belonging to it. Fragile bodies endure where armored ones would fail. Transparent forms hide where solid ones would be hunted. Light appears not to banish darkness, but to speak within it. You exhale slowly, letting the water carry you deeper. The creatures fade again into shadow, their dances brief but unforgettable. You are left with the echo of their presence, the afterimage of their light. You realize you will not see them again in the same way. The trench reveals its dancers only once, then asks you to carry their memory like a lantern. The silence thickens. Your breath slows. Ahead, the dance of creatures gives way to something else. The stage remains, but the music changes. The trench is leading you not into more forms, but into less. Into a place where silence itself becomes the teacher. You let yourself drift. The glow of creatures behind. The soundless weight ahead. The abyss asks you now not to look, but to listen. Chapter 6. The Sound of Silence. You do not hear nothingness. You hear the shape of quiet, pressed into being by depth. The water around you carries fewer sounds with each meter, until the loudest thing is your own breath, a ribbon of air loosening and gathering again. In this stillness, you notice what quiet contains: patience, distance, the long memory of the sea. Silence here is not an empty room. It is a landscape. It has slopes and hollows, corridors where sound slips away, and pockets where it lingers. The ocean guides voices differently with depth, bending them along layers where temperature and pressure shift. Some tones travel far, hugging a hidden pathway. Others fade quickly, dissolved in the thick water. You float inside this architecture as if within a cathedral whose walls are liquid. A faint tremor arrives like a thought you almost forgot to think. Far above, wind wrinkles the surface, and that weather presses its fingers into the sea as noise. Ships carve lines of iron across the water, and their engines send a low murmur downward for miles. Far away, ice breaks, or a fault slips. The sounds do not arrive as sharp edges. Depth softens them, wears them smooth. By the time they reach you, they are round stones rolling along the seafloor of your hearing. You listen through your bones. Your ears are not alone. The soft scaffolding of your body becomes a receiver, sensing slow drums you cannot name. A whale, somewhere in the open dark, releases a call built for distance, a bell of breath and muscle. You do not hear a song. You hear a room being drawn around you by that voice, vast and deliberate. For a moment you feel less alone, as if a navigator has lit a lantern and set it adrift. Then the lantern dims, and quiet returns with heavier grace. You notice the small sounds you make without meaning to. A swallow, the tightening of your jaw, the knock of your heartbeat against your ribs. Even the rise and fall of your thoughts grows audible in this wide hush. Noise becomes a map of what still holds tension. You let your jaw soften. You loosen your hands. The map redraws itself into smoother lines. The trench itself speaks in slow syllables. Rocks settle on ledges you cannot see. A ridge releases a sigh of grains. Now and then, there's a sound like the page of a heavy book turning, a distant shift of crust, too far to fear, close enough to feel. The planet is not still, even here. It simply moves on timescales that slip past human calendars. You accept that largeness and allow its pace to steady you. Between those long notes is the music of almost nothing. Bubbles lift from unseen creatures and vanish. A small predator cuts water with a fin, like the stroke of a calligrapher's brush. Sediment drifts and taps a shell once, and that single sound becomes a story because it is alone. You learn how attention sharpens when the world grows quiet. The fewer the sounds, the more each one becomes itself. The quiet does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be gentle. You time your breath to an imagined tide. Inhale, a slow gathering. Exhale, a longer release. The ocean around you seems to answer, holding its pressure steady like hands at your back. You feel buoyed by something that has no voice, and yet communicates the oldest instruction. Be here. In this chamber of hush, memory surfaces like a fish. You remember night fields on land, when wind moved through grass with the same soft insistence. You remember snowfall, each flake a soundless brightness. The trench gives you versions of those moments, translated into salt and weight. The feeling is kinship. Quiet recognizes quiet. Scientific words come and pass like seabirds. Amplitude, frequency, attenuation. You let them drift through without clatter. They are true, and the truths they point to are simple in the body. Colder water slows molecules. Pressure packs them close, and together they carry sound differently than air. You do not recite this. You breathe it. You let the facts dissolve into sensations your skin already understands. What surprises you is that silence can feel full. It fills the places where hurry used to live. It fills the rooms where fear kept asking for light. In its company, you notice how much of your life on the surface was made of echoes. Reaction, reply, repeat. Down here, the echo is so long that it becomes a pause wide enough to turn around in. There is room to ask better questions. You ask one now, quietly. What does life do with a quiet this deep? The answer arrives without words. It arrives as behavior. Creatures move less and listen more. Many have no need for eyes. Lips learn the language of touch. Whiskers test currents. Lateral lines along fish read pressure like braille. Even microbes sense gradients, climbing invisible hills of chemistry. Survival here is a mastery of faint signals. Your own senses follow their example. You feel a current stroke your arm, with a temperature a fraction cooler than the rest. You feel it again, a patient pulse. Somewhere to your left, water is rising slowly, replaced by something gently different. You cannot see it yet. You only feel the hint of change, the edge of a boundary drawn in moving cold. In the stillness, you realize that quiet is not the lack of story. It is the beginning of one. When the noise falls away, detail grows. You notice the seam between one layer and the next, the narrow places where forces meet. The trench offers you such a seam now, a subtle ribbon that grazes your wrist like silk. You turn toward it without turning at all. Your body follows the gradient the way a root follows moisture. The hush thickens, then thins, like a curtain being parted. Inside that parting is a new murmur, not loud, not near, but present in a different register. It is not the far engine or the distant wail. It is not sand shifting on stone. It is a thread of sound you feel more than hear, continuous and patient. You drift along that thread. The water around you carries a suspicion of taste, metallic and clean, as if a battery has touched your tongue. The temperature is still cold, but there is a shape to that cold now, a boundary drawn with a careful hand. With each exhale, you grow lighter. With each inhale, you match the pace of something steadily happening beyond sight. Silence remains, but it has changed from blankness to frame. It holds a softness within which a new voice can arrive. You wait without reaching. You listen without leaning forward. The abyss tightens its ampersand of quiet and distance, inviting you to step through. You do, and the hush that has been a room becomes a hallway, then a path, then a door half opened by a warmer draft. Chapter 7. Heat in the cold. The cold is constant here. It wraps itself around you like endless fabric, steady and unbroken. The trench holds a temperature near freezing, water chilled by currents that have traveled from the polar seas. Every inch of your skin feels its grip. And yet, even in this kingdom of ice dark, you begin to notice something else. The water ahead is not the same. It carries a subtle shift, a thread of warmth rising upward through the quiet. At first, it feels impossible. Warmth here, 11 kilometers beneath the surface. And yet, as you drift closer, the evidence is undeniable. The water shivers differently against your arm. The taste of it changes, a faint bitterness of minerals carried in solution. You are approaching one of the deep ocean's strangest paradoxes, hydrothermal vents. They appear suddenly out of the darkness, as if sculpted by unseen hands. Towers rise from the seafloor, chimneys of black stone built by heat itself. From their tops gush plumes of fluid, darker than the water around them, curling upward like smoke in a still room. These are no ordinary towers. They are wounds in the crust, openings where seawater has seeped into the earth, met molten rock below, and been forced back upward in a rush of heat. The contrast is astonishing. All around, the trench is cold enough to steal warmth from your bones. But here, at the base of these vents, temperatures can soar past hundreds of degrees Celsius. Yet the pressure is so immense that water does not boil. It pours upward instead, carrying metals and minerals in rich clouds. Scientists call them black smokers for their dark plumes, though some are lighter, shimmering like silver smoke. You hover in awe. These chimneys are alive in their own way, breathing heat into the abyss. Around them, the water ripples with distortion, as though light itself bends. You feel as though you are standing beside a campfire in the middle of an endless winter, improbable warmth, fierce but contained. Even more wondrous is what gathers here. Around the vents, life blossoms. In this place where no sunlight enters, energy comes not from photosynthesis, but from chemosynthesis. Tiny microbes feast on the minerals carried upward, transforming them into fuel. They are the first spark, the beginning of an entire ecosystem. From those sparks, a community blooms. Giant tube worms rise in clusters, their white bodies sheathed in protective casings, their tips a startling crimson red. They have no mouths, no stomachs, no eyes. Instead, they host bacteria within their tissues, a partnership where the microbes make food from the vent's chemicals and the worms provide shelter. Together, they thrive in a place where nothing should live. Nearby, shrimp swarm across the rocks, their backs glowing faintly with the heat. Some species are nearly blind, yet they sense the faintest gradients of warmth, guiding them to the vent's edge. Mussels and clams anchor themselves in dense beds, opening and closing their shells in rhythm with invisible currents. Even crabs, pale and slow, scuttle across the mineral crust, scavenging from the bounty. It is a scene of impossible abundance. Here, in the deepest cold, warmth has created islands of life. The trench is no longer barren. It pulses with resilience, with communities that live not by the sun, but by the earth's own inner fire. You let the sight fill you with wonder. If life can flourish here, in darkness and pressure, warmed only by hidden vents, what boundaries can truly hold it? The chimneys themselves grow taller as minerals solidify around their mouths. Over years, decades, centuries, they rise like towers in a silent city. Some collapse and rebuild. Others merge and split, constantly reshaped by the flow of water. They are not permanent, but neither are they fleeting. They endure long enough for generations of creatures to call them home. You notice the paradox more deeply now. Just beyond the vent circle, the water is icy again, cold enough to halt growth. Yet within the circle, warmth brings life. To survive here is to balance between extremes, too far from the vent, and the cold will starve you. Too close, and the heat will destroy you. Every creature finds its place along this gradient, tuned like an instrument to the range where survival is possible. You think of your own life above. Balance is everywhere. Too much light blinds. Too much shadow conceals. Too much speed exhausts. Too much stillness stagnates. Like the creatures of the trench, you are always seeking the narrow band where living is possible, where you are warmed enough to grow, but not burned by excess. The trench holds a mirror to your own survival, showing you that life thrives not in absolutes, but in balance. The warmth curls upward still, its plumes twisting into the cold water like smoke against winter air. You let your mind drift upward with it, following the rising flow. As it moves, it cools, minerals falling like snow, settling across the trench floor. This, too, is part of the story. The vents do not only feed those clustered close, they shape the wider ocean, seeding it with iron and sulfur, gifts carried far beyond your sight. Scientists believe that life on Earth may have begun in places like this. Billions of years ago, when the young planet was hotter, its seas wilder, vents may have provided the first energy, the first shelter, the first spark. In that sense, to witness these chimneys is to look into a mirror of origins. The trench may not just be deep in space, but deep in time. You feel the warmth now, not only as temperature, but as presence, a reminder that even in the coldest night, hidden fires continue to burn. They do not ask for notice. They do not shout. They simply rise, patient and constant, bringing possibility into places that would otherwise know only silence. You drift a little farther from the vent, and the warmth fades, the cold returning with its steady grip. Yet you are not the same. You carry the knowledge that hidden fires live even in dark waters, that life clusters around them with quiet persistence. The trench, once imagined only as emptiness, has revealed another of its paradoxes. It holds both ice and fire, silence and song, pressure and release. Ahead, the warmth dissolves, leaving you in the steady cold once more. The vents vanish into shadow, their towers swallowed by distance. The silence thickens, and beneath you, the seafloor stretches into folds of mud and stone. The ocean is turning the page again, leading you away from fire and back toward memory. The sediment below holds layers upon layers, each one a chapter of Earth's history. Fossils, minerals, ashes, and dust all drift downward and rest here, storing time in silence. You are leaving the warmth behind, carried gently toward the trench's library of ages, where the mud whispers in grains and layers. Chapter 8, Messages in the Mud. The warmth of the hydrothermal vents fades behind you, dissolving into the cold once more. The water steadies, calm and heavy, and you drift downward until your gaze meets the trench floor itself. At first, it looks empty, a plain of pale mud stretching out into shadow. But the longer you linger, the more you see. The mud is not blank. It is a book, written in layers of silence. Each grain of sediment is a memory. Tiny fragments of shells, bones of creatures too small for the eye to name. Dust carried on winds, from deserts thousands of kilometers away. Volcanic ash, fallen like snow from eruptions long forgotten, rests side by side with the remains of drifting plankton that bloomed and died at the surface centuries ago. Together, they form a patient record of time, settled grain by grain into a story deeper than any human library. You imagine brushing your hand across it, and in doing so, brushing against ages. The topmost layer is new, just days or weeks old, the faint snowfall of marine snow that is always drifting downward. Beneath that, months. Beneath that, centuries. Each centimeter deeper in the mud is another step backward into history. If you could keep digging, you would pass into eras before your kind existed, before forests covered continents, before dinosaurs walked the land. The trench floor remembers what the surface forgets. Scientists who study these sediments do so carefully, pulling up cores, long cylinders of mud extracted from the seafloor. Within them, they find bands like tree rings, markers of past events. A layer rich with ash may tell of a volcanic eruption. A shift in color might signal an ice age, when currents carried different minerals. Tiny shells, when counted and measured, reveal how ocean temperatures changed, how currents shifted, how life itself adapted. In this way, the trench becomes an archive of Earth's climate, a memory kept safe in the quiet. You let that thought sink in. The deepest mud of the ocean may know more about the planet's past than mountains above. The surface erodes, forests burn, rivers carve valleys, and winds strip away soil. But here, at the bottom of the sea, sediment accumulates quietly, layer upon layer, almost never disturbed. What looks like stillness is really collection. What looks like silence is really storage. Marine snow drifts down even as you float here. The soft rain of organic material, flecks of dead plankton, fish scales, tiny fragments of life. It is gentle, continuous, endless. Without it, the trench would starve. With it, even the deepest amphipods find sustenance. You think of it as a snowfall that never melts, a quiet winter that feeds rather than freezes. Each flake that falls becomes another sentence in the book of the abyss. The mud does not only preserve the story of life, it also remembers the restless movements of the earth itself. The trench was carved by subduction, the slow sliding of one plate beneath another, and this movement continues. Landslides rumble down its walls. Earthquakes shake sediments loose, layering them in uneven ways. These sudden events leave signatures, twisted bands, jumbled deposits, scars written in mud. Even chaos is recorded here. Even disaster becomes memory. You imagine yourself reading it slowly, page by page. A thin band of dark sediment marks a time of abundant plankton blooms, when the ocean above flourished with life. A pale layer shows a colder era, when ice locked much of the world's water on land. A sudden streak of ash recalls a volcanic outburst that once turned skies red. Every event, large or small, ends here eventually, laid gently into the archive. In your mind, you see the trench not just as a hollow, but as a vault. It does not forget. Even fragments of human history have already begun to arrive. Particles of plastic, traces of industrial soot, heavy metals carried from distant rivers. The trench has accepted these too, storing them alongside shells and bones. Your age has already written itself into the mud, a reminder that nothing humans create vanishes completely. Everything leaves a trace. This thought stirs a quiet humility in you. Above, it is easy to imagine that lives vanish, that moments pass unrecorded. But here, even the smallest grain matters. The trench does not judge. It simply keeps. It gathers without haste, without choice, holding each fragment in equal measure. In its patience, it reminds you that memory is not always loud. Sometimes it is as soft as silt, as invisible as dust, as steady as the fall of marine snow. You breathe slowly, and the water presses against your chest like the weight of time itself. You imagine your own memories settling like this, layer upon layer. The laughter of childhood, the quiet of nights, the voices you have loved and lost. All press gently into you, waiting beneath the surface. You are not unlike the trench. You carry your own archive, often hidden, but always there. The mud stretches endlessly before you. Its surface looks smooth, but you know it conceals valleys and ridges, carved by currents and landslides. You picture amphipods digging into it, worms threading through it, microbes feeding on its minerals. Even the archive is alive, not static. The record of time is not a museum, but a living book, always being written, always being touched. Still, you sense that there is something solemn here. The silence feels heavier, as if the mud itself is asking for respect. You listen to it the way you might listen to an elder, someone who carries stories far older than your own. The trench floor speaks not in words, but in patience. It tells you, everything settles. Everything finds its lair. You let the lesson rest in you. The mud does not resist what falls into it. It receives. It allows. It holds. You wonder what it might mean to live that way, to accept what arrives in your life, to let it settle gently, to become part of a deeper story rather than a wound. The trench teaches not only survival, but memory. Your descent slows. You hover close to the mud, as if reading the surface of a page. The water here is calm, unmoving, and yet, in its stillness, it holds the weight of continents, the record of ages, the story of life itself. You breathe, and the marine snow continues to fall, quiet and unbroken. You realize you could drift here forever, watching history settle, watching silence write. But the trench is not finished with its story. Ahead lies something new, not memory, but witness. For as much as the mud has recorded, it is human eyes that have only recently begun to see. The floor fades behind you as you drift onward, leaving the archive in silence. The trench has shown you its memory. Now it will show you discovery. Chapter 9. Human Eyes on the Abyss. For most of human history, the trench was nothing more than rumor. Sailors crossed the Pacific above it, never knowing the depth that lay beneath their keels. Maps of the ocean marked this place with blankness, or with numbers too large to seem real. It was a hole in knowledge, a silence beneath the sea, unmeasured and unseen. Only the waves above betrayed its presence, endless and indifferent. You imagine those early centuries of curiosity. People looked outward at the stars long before they looked downward at the deep. The heavens were visible. The abyss was not. A telescope could reach light years, but no eye could pierce 11 kilometers of water. To descend meant surrendering to pressure, darkness, silence. For a long time, the abyss kept its privacy. That privacy began to thin in the 20th century, when technology at last caught up with curiosity. In 1875, the British ship HMS Challenger lowered weighted lines into the Pacific and measured a depth deeper than anything known before. They named it the Challenger Deep. It was the first hint of how vast the trench truly was. But a weighted line is not a gaze. It told only of numbers, not of sights. The abyss still waited, unseen. You drift now in imagination to 1960, when two men entered a vessel unlike any other, the Trieste. It was a bathyscaphe, a strange hybrid of steel and buoyancy. Above, a float filled with gasoline to counter the weight. Below, a small steel sphere, thick-walled and heavy, just large enough for two. Jacques Picard and Don Walsh climbed inside, closed the hatch, and allowed themselves to sink. As you picture it, you feel the claustrophobia of that chamber. The sphere was barely 2 meters wide, lined with controls, gauges, and a small window. The walls were built to endure pressures unimaginable. Yet as the descent continued, they groaned and popped like wood in winter frost. The two men sat in silence, listening to the sound of the ocean pressing against metal, waiting to know if the sphere would hold. They drifted downward for nearly 5 hours. No sunlight accompanied them, only the weak glow of their own lamps. At 10,900 meters, they touched the seafloor of the Challenger Deep. The bottom was not jagged as they expected, but soft, covered in fine silt. They saw life, a flatfish, they thought, though later studies suggested it may have been a sea cucumber or another creature. Whatever it was, it proved a truth. Life persisted even here. After 20 minutes, they rose again, the sphere creaking as if relieved. You float beside them in your imagination, feeling their awe. For the first time, human eyes had touched the abyss not in theory but in presence. The trench had become more than a number. It had become a place visited, witnessed, recorded. Decades passed before anyone returned. The depths remained too dangerous, the technology too costly. But in 2012, filmmaker James Cameron descended alone in his vessel, the Deep Sea Challenger. His submersible was green, sleek, and engineered like a vertical torpedo. Inside, he sat curled in a chamber barely larger than himself, lit only by monitors and lamps. For 2.5 hours, he fell downward through miles of black water until he reached the floor once more. There, he filmed. Cameras captured the barren mud, the drifting particles, the strange stillness of the trench. He described it later as desolate, lunar, alien. Yet even in its darkness, it was magnificent. The abyss had not changed in silence, but human eyes had finally returned to keep it company. You imagine yourself inside one of these vessels now, sharing their gaze. Through the small window, the trench unfolds in the narrow beam of artificial light. Creatures dart from the glow, startled. The mud reflects a faint shimmer, as if stirred by your presence. The silence is thicker here, broken only by the creak of metal and the hum of machinery. The deeper you go, the more you understand how fragile this contact is. One crack, one flaw, and the abyss would reclaim its privacy. Other expeditions have followed since. Robotic submersibles, unmanned but watchful, have recorded hours of footage, sending back images of snailfish, amphipods, and glowing jellies. Each mission adds new details to the trench's biography. Scientists analyze the mud, test the chemistry of the water, study the adaptations of creatures. Each discovery humbles. There's always more unseen. Yet, as you drift alongside these memories, you notice something tender. The trench does not reveal itself easily. Lights only show what is near. Cameras see only what is framed. Each expedition is both achievement and limitation. For every image captured, thousands of moments vanish unseen into the dark. The abyss reminds you that knowledge, no matter how advanced, will always be partial. Still, you feel the wonder of it. To send eyes, human or robotic, into such depth is to extend imagination itself. Each descent is a kind of conversation, a question posed to the earth. What lives here? What waits here? And the trench answers, slowly, reluctantly, but always with something unexpected. You reflect on how small the submersibles are compared to the scale of the abyss. A tiny sphere of steel, a fragile craft of lights and wires, drifting in an oceanic canyon large enough to swallow mountains. Yet in that smallness is courage. To place yourself into such immensity is to admit humility, and to seek wonder anyway. The trench, once private, is now a place of shared vision. Children see images of snailfish and anglerfish. Scientists debate the chemistry of vents. Filmmakers show the barren beauty of the seafloor. Humanity, in its restless curiosity, has reached even here. And yet, the trench remains itself, vast, unbothered, unchanged by our visits. You let this realization calm you. Human eyes may glimpse, but the abyss does not depend on being seen. It was here long before you, and it will remain long after. Our discoveries are gifts, not conquests. The trench gives what it will, and holds what it chooses. You think again of the silence. Submersibles carry microphones as well as cameras, and the sounds they record are haunting. Distant rumbles of tectonic plates, the call of whales thousands of kilometers away, even the faint hum of human activity carried down from the surface. In the trench, sound travels far. It is a reminder that even here, isolation is not absolute. The abyss listens, just as you listen now. You picture yourself riding alongside one of those vessels, your hand resting against the thick window, your face close to the glass. Outside, a pale creature glides by, its fins like wings, its eyes like lanterns. For a brief moment, it looks back at you, or perhaps you only imagine it does. The moment passes, the creature drifts into shadow, and you are left with your reflection on the glass, layered against the dark. You realize that to look into the trench is also to look into yourself. The silence grows again as the vessel prepares to rise. The lights dim, the mud recedes, the pressure lessens. Yet the memory lingers. You carry it upward, a reminder that discovery is not an end, but an opening. Each descent asks for another. Each sight invites a deeper question. The trench has shown you what human eyes have seen, but still, most of it remains unseen. For every discovery, there is more hidden, waiting patiently in silence. You drift with that thought, aware that curiosity does not end here. It only deepens. Ahead, the trench prepares its final lesson. You have seen its shape, its pressure, its darkness, its creatures, its warmth, its memories, and its first discoveries. But one more truth waits. The abyss, in its stillness, mirrors something far beyond itself. To look at the trench is also to look at the stars. Chapter 10. The Trench and the Stars. You have drifted downward through light, through pressure, through silence and fire. You have seen creatures born of necessity, fragile and luminous, carrying their own lanterns into the dark. You have listened to the trench's memory, read its pages written in mud. You have looked through human eyes pressed against thick glass, daring to witness. And now, at the end of this descent, you discover something unexpected. The abyss does not only belong to Earth, it belongs to the cosmos. The thought begins quietly, almost shy, as you notice the resemblance. The bioluminescent sparks that lit your path are scattered in patterns not unlike constellations. A fish's glow here, a jelly's ribbon there. They resemble the scattered stars that freckle the night sky. Darkness above, darkness below. Both broken not by sun, but by scattered points of fragile light. It feels as though you are floating not in the sea, but in space turned inside out. You let the idea unfold. Just as the trench holds pressure unimaginable, so too does space hold gravity vast enough to bend time itself. The trench is carved where tectonic plates collide, one sliding beneath another. Space is carved where stars collapse, where black holes form valleys in space-time. Both are creases. Both are folds in the larger fabric, reminders that nothing is truly flat. The planet bends inward, the universe bends outward, and in their shapes, they echo each other. You picture yourself suspended in the trench as if it were a galaxy. The mud floor is not barren, but like a distant planetary surface, holding fossils and memories like craters. The vents rise like mountains on alien worlds, spewing minerals instead of lava, feeding life instead of fire. The creatures here are as strange as any imagined alien. Transparent, glowing, their bodies designed for realms no human was meant to endure. You realize that you do not need to leave Earth to meet the alien. You need only to go deeper. The stars above and the trench below share another truth. Both remind you of scale. The night sky humbles with its endlessness, galaxies stacked beyond vision. The trench humbles with its closeness, a single canyon deeper than imagination. In each, you are reminded of your size, not as ruler, not as master, but as one small breath among immensities. This realization does not crush you. It softens you. To be small is to belong, to be part of something vast and ongoing. Your thoughts drift to the ancient ones who first looked at the night sky. They told stories about the stars, hunters, rivers, gods. Perhaps if they had seen the trench, they would have told similar stories here. The snailfish would be a spirit of surrender. The glowing jellies would be lanterns of ancestors. The vents would be hearths at the bottom of the world. The trench is its own mythology, just as the sky is. Both are mirrors, and humans cannot help but seek meaning in both. Science, too, sees the parallels. The technology built to explore the trench resembles that used to reach the moon. Thick walls to withstand pressure, precise instruments to measure in extremes, cameras to record what no eye has seen. Submersibles and spacecraft are siblings, built for opposite directions but similar purposes: to touch the unreachable, to carry fragile life into inhospitable worlds. The trench and the stars have shaped the same kind of daring, the same refusal to accept blankness. You feel it now as you hover. The deep and the distant are not opposites, but twins. The universe above expands outward into infinity. The trench below contracts inward into intimacy. One stretches your gaze into distance, the other folds it into depth. Both leave you speechless. Both invite you to surrender to mystery. The stillness around you deepens. You close your eyes, and for a moment you cannot tell whether you are drifting in water or floating in space. The sensations blend: weightlessness, silence, darkness, scattered light. You realize that the body cannot tell the difference. Only the mind names one ocean and the other cosmos. Beneath those names, they are the same. They are vast, patient, and alive in ways that refuse easy explanation. The trench reminds you that even on your own planet, there are places as unknown as distant galaxies. The stars remind you that beyond your planet, there are abysses even greater than this. To contemplate one is to glimpse the other. When you think of galaxies, you remember the glowing jellies. When you think of the trench, you remember the scattering of stars. Each reflects, each teaches, each humbles. And then another thought arrives, quiet but insistent. Perhaps the reason the trench feels so much like space is because they are both part of the same whole. The earth is not separate from the cosmos. Its oceans, its mountains, its trenches, they are expressions of the same universe that forged stars and galaxies. To drift here is to drift in the cosmos already. You have never left it. You have always been in space, carried upon one of its small blue oceans. The silence grows wider, wrapping you like a cloak. You think of your own life, your own struggles, your own questions. Compared to the abyss and the stars, they seem small. But in their smallness, they are not meaningless. They are sediments in your own trench, sparks in your own night sky. To be human is to carry both weight and light, both burden and wonder. You belong to the trench and the stars alike. You inhale, you exhale. The water presses around you, steady and calm. You imagine that each breath is tied to both worlds. You breathe oxygen born of plankton in the sea. You breathe atoms forged in stars long dead. Every breath is trench and cosmos together, folded into your body. The realization soothes you. You are not separate. You are continuity itself. The trench begins to fade into quiet once more. You sense the journey nearing its close, not because the abyss has ended, but because it has carried you to its mirror. You have seen its shape, its pressure, its silence, its fire, its memory. its creatures, its witnesses. And now you see its meaning. It reflects the stars, not as opposite, but as sibling. The deepest part of the ocean is also a window into the furthest parts of the sky. You let the thought rest in you. You drift weightless, timeless, borderless. Around you, the trench holds silence. Above you, the universe holds stars. Between them, you breathe, a small presence woven into both. The last words the abyss seems to whisper are not instructions, not conclusions, but invitation. Continue wondering. The trench does not close its story. The stars do not close theirs. Both stretch beyond endings. Both ask you to return again and again, each time seeing more than before. You exhale one final time, and as the bubbles rise, you follow them upward in imagination, carrying the quiet lessons of the deep. When you reach the surface, you will look up at the sky differently. Each star will remind you of a glowing fish. Each galaxy will remind you of a drifting jelly. Each silence between constellations will remind you of the hush at the trench floor. And when you close your eyes to sleep, you will remember the abyss and the stars are not separate places. They are one story told in two directions, one inward, one outward. Both remind you that you are small, that you are fragile, and that you are, in your very being, made of light and depth. The trench, like the cosmos, does not end. It waits in silence, holding its secrets, waiting for you to wonder again.